Hi, hello.
Hey guys, welcome back to the SAUCY SIBZ podcast with your host. I'm Francesca.
And I'm Nicodemus.
And we are joined here today by Devon Phillips, a new friend.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. So I'm just going to go ahead and read your full background.
Uh-oh.
And I literally stole it from the MAPS website.
Okay.
I was writing it on my own, and then I was like, oh, this is perfect. All right, guys, ready? So Devon is the Creative Strategist for the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS, and co-founder of the harm reduction organization More Life. With his work, Devon develops cultural-facing strategies to answer the question, how do we responsibly mainstream psychedelics? His background is in behavioral neuroscience and human-centered design, but has a deep love for art, music, and fashion. Before joining MAPS, Devon founded a virtual reality software startup that was later acquired in 2018, which does not mention here you sold for, what, 7 figures or something?
It was decent.
Yeah, decent. Devon describes himself as a culture nerd that loves the complexity of humanity and wants to be the bridge between our cultures and consciousness exploration.
Yes.
All right.
So a nerd, essentially.
Yeah.
A nerd.
Did we forget
One
anything
big nerd.
there?
Yeah.
Just a big nerd thing. No, I do a lot of drug stuff and culture stuff and cultural facing strategies.
So we met you because you're also an ambassador now with Invisible City.
True.
We've shouted out our friend Paul on the podcast a few times, and he had an event where he invited all the ambassadors, literally a room of the 50 coolest people.
I'd say so.
In Denver
Yeah.
or that I've ever met. And we were just chit-chatting, and I had said to you that I think the psychedelic conference, I don't know how it came up, or maybe that I met you. That's what it was. I met you and you were tripping really hard and not speaking at an event.
Yeah, you probably saw how tired I was too. That's the kind of a mixture. People are like, why are you looking so tired? I was like, well, I've been working on this conference for a year and a half, so it could have been either one. But yeah, that was that was a while back. Yeah,
and then I just mentioned it, and I was like, oh, we were supposed to go, and we just decided not to. But then our friend was hanging out with Paul Stamets, and that's crazy. And you were just like, oh yeah, Paul's a close homie, and I was like, okay, casual. Then we got into the conference, then everything. But basically our friend Paul was just saying, he's like,
Paul was just like, oh, Devon won't mention it, but he pretty much just put on the entire MAPS conference. And you were just like, nah. And then he was like, no, but really you did. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the words from Paul. Paul's a great friend of mine also. Shout out to Paul. We had a small team that put on the conference, and I cannot at all take all the credit. I have imposter syndrome every single day I work at MAPS. I guess a little background on MAPS. Been around since 1986. Rick Rubin, our founder, is he's just a funny, goofy visionary in the psychedelic space. He's been really pushing this since MDMA became illegal in 1986. And even prior to that, he was kind of a pioneer in these therapies and his uses of substances. We had a small team that worked on it, but my coworkers Izzy and Natalie and Liana, those, they're just pioneers and these thought leaders in the space. And, I got to work beside them. So yes, I had a heavy load, and have I slept in 18 months? Not really. I took a couple of weeks off so I could sleep every day essentially. We were able to pull something off really great. It was 12,000 people. It was at the Colorado Convention Center, which by itself is already kind of a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
We were able to make something magical that at first started as a crazy idea from Rick, which that's usually how it starts. He's like, hey, we're going to have 10,000 people come to Denver, Colorado for a psychedelic conference. We're like, okay, sick. And then through the fire, we got done and had a really amazing time.
So impressive. And that conference wasn't just people hanging out talking about psychedelics. It's the premier conference about just where the psychedelic world is heading pretty much.
Yeah. No, I mean, psychedelics is a weird world.
Yeah.
Word in world, right? Could be umbrella. What is a psychedelics? What's the objective and subjective? And a lot of these conversations had nothing to really do with psychedelics, quote unquote. It's inclusivity, how do you handle policy? How do you handle community? At the end of the day, Community Hills, we're a research company. We have a research arm for PBC. It's our for-profit pharma. MAPS is a nonprofit, but we have a for-profit arm called PBC. Research is great, and the medical pathway is great. FDA is great, but there's also a side of where many people came up like me. and also cultural indigenous usage. And it's like, how do you offer these substances and these way of life and these conversations to people that are throughout the spectrum, throughout, yes, the research lab, but also the basketball courts, the skate parks, the salons, the barbershops. And these conversations are ever expanding. So at these conferences, we have brilliant indigenous leaders talking, brilliant researchers, but we also had like, Jaden Smith was there and Aaron Rodgers was there talking about sports. And we had Dr. Hooverman and try to get a wide range of a conversation to reach the different areas of the place so people can learn where they're at.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. That's amazing. Aaron Rodgers, what was he doing? I saw a lot of photos of him there. I was like,
you have no idea about him in psychedelics?
Yeah.
My overview that I know is basically he did ayahuasca, it changed his life, and it like took his career, like shot it up.
Oh, really?
So he really talks about it.
Yeah. Huh. So, it's so funny. When Aaron Rodgers was there, we got hit up by every major news outlet possible for Aaron Rodgers. And we know the deal why. But like, so yeah, him and Aubrey Marcus are really close friends.
Mm-hmm.
Aubrey's done like 48 ayahuasca ceremonies himself. And they went on a couple of medicine journeys together, and it really changed his life in the way that he says he loves himself and loves others. And he, after his first experience, he went on to win the MVP in the NFL that year. So we invited him, and we sometimes get slack for it because you have this rich white guy who's done drugs and he makes a lot of money, which we completely understand. But we didn't invite Aaron Rodgers because we thought Aaron Rodgers is like the mastermind of ayahuasca, right? Like a shaman now. We brought him because, multiple reasons. One, anyone who has a story about transformation and loving oneself, we want to get out, especially when they have a following, an audience. And two, football is such thought of as like a masculine game, right? Especially in like single parent homes. A lot of kids look up to football players as like the example of success, this disciplined, famous, swaggy guy who has the money, has the clothes or whatever, but has to put on this like manly persona of being no feelings, is hard all the time. So you had someone who's at the top of this game talking about, I was able to do great not because of how strong I am, because of how much I figured out I love myself and others. So it allows that like new persona perspective that a lot of these kids or even adults haven't been able to really see. So that's what we brought him. It was like a total bromance. Him and Aubrey are up there just doing that, right? So again, we're not trying to say like, hey, this is what the key ayahuasca person looks like. This is like, hey, this person has a really genuine story that he believes. He's not doing this. He can't get any more famous, essentially. Let's invite him for him to tell his story and see if we can change perspective and responsibly mainstream psychedelics.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that like you're pretty much at the top of the conference and like able to have that conversation of wanting to be constructive about it. But that's also kind of psychedelic too. I feel like the people who are very psychonautic are always the ones that kind of have like a deeper understanding of just cultural problems in general and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 28. I don't know shit about shit, really. Like, I mean, like,
yeah.
I couldn't believe that you were 28 when I did the math from the last podcast I listened to, and you were 26, and I was like, he's 28. You've done so much. Like, it's
I'm
wild.
Genuinely like amazed.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been punched a lot. And again, so it's like, I could be learning about this for 20 years. Like, the psychedelic community is such a weird thing to me. I don't really believe I'll probably get slack for this too. Psychedelic community to me is so weird because I never felt like I came from a psychedelic community. I'm from West Texas. I didn't know about Ram Dass or like indigenous wisdom or like Timothy Leary. I came up doing drugs at music festivals with my friends.
Yeah.
Like that's just that. And I came up trying to defeat the war on drugs. I had broken home. Dad was in prison most of my life for drugs. Like, community to me was a community I saw outside, my family, my friends. Like a psychedelic community to me doesn't really exist because like in some aspects, because I think psychedelics is spark, not the flame. Mm-hmm. Usually when you have an additive like that describes the community, if you take that away, the community's gone. If we're a basketball community, that means we play basketball a lot. And if you take away basketball, we're no longer a community. If you're a psychedelic community, you take the psychedelic out, you're still the community.
Yeah.
Like the psychedelic maybe showed you the best way to love on each other, but that doesn't disappear once you take the drug out. Now, maybe for like a psychedelic chemistry community, you're doing chemistry, like, okay, dope, take chemistry out, you're no longer there. So yeah, it's like from the outsider looking in, it's just always been like a very weird concept to me because like all this infighting is, I think we're trying to describe something we're trying to describe the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I always feel like going back to the imposter syndrome, I don't know shit about shit. I'm glad when someone will like come kind of like correct us because it's like, I'm learning as you are too.
Mm-hmm.
So coming from that like conservative West Texas background, how would you maybe like help me or help other people? Or like, what do you say when you talk to people when they, you know, hear that you came up doing psychedelics from doing drugs at music festivals? How do you talk to them, or kind of what are your go-to things when they just think like it's just drugs?
Yeah, I usually just put acid in their water. Yeah, well, that's why it's like it's so important to come from a humble servant mentality to like actually listen to somebody, because you're always gonna have the rough exterior of like war on drugs, especially in the South.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. Put that aside. Take a substance aside. Do you know anyone who's battling depression, or do you know anyone who has PTSD? Usually, they have a cousin, uncle, brother, son who was in the military or has dealt with PTSD. It's like, great. What if there was an option to go through a therapy, because this is MDMA assisted psychotherapy, or MDMA assisted therapy. Can't say psychotherapy anymore. And the whole goal of it is for you not to be in medication for the rest of your life, right? So what if there was an option for your loved one to be able to be a son again, right? Not to take a pill every single day and feel like a zombie or feel whatever. Would you look into that because you love that person? Take the stigma aside of whatever it's called. We can call it gummy bears.
Yeah.
Right. If the core of it's to help someone you love, would you try that out? Cool. Great. I'm not telling you to be a hippie. I'm not telling you to go to Woodstock. You know, it's like, how can we solve this problem for you? All right, let's start there. Now let's do some research over what you're trying to solve. Oh, we saw this documentary over, you know, or we found the nonprofit Heroic Hearts. We showed them that. It's like, look at all these veterans who've had all this help doing these ayahuasca ceremonies or doing MDMA therapy. Great. So now they're on the learning journey of healing for their loved one, not so much a psychedelic journey. I think we try to like get them on the bandwagon, like you should do drugs and psychedelics, right? When that's not they're problem oriented. So we gotta be solution oriented. We start there. It's like, oh well, so the same drug that, you know, people would take at clubs can help my loved one, and then it like kind of opens them up. They start watching movies, they start reading books, because again, when they in conservative cities, they always look in like a double consciousness way of life. It's like, not only how do I look at something, how will my neighbor look at me if they know I'm looking at this?
Yeah.
Wow.
So you need to give them info that they can almost justify it to their neighbors. Like, no. I'm not saying we should do acid. I'm saying like, you know, they're using this for therapeutic to treat PTSD, where I think it's like 1 in 8 people or it's like 4 million people in the US suffer from right now. You need to give them those bits and pieces for them to justify to their pastor, or justify to their grandma, or justify to whatever.
Yeah.
So when you give them that, they don't look like a drug carrying person. It kind of sucks, but like that's just the way I look at it. So it's like, where are they coming from? If it's not like a veteran thing, if it's them personally, it's like, hey, do you take a medication? Dr. Carl Hart has a beautiful book called Drug Use for Grown-Ups. So it's like, have you ever, anyone taking Adderall? Well, Adderall and methamphetamine are decently close. So there's a methyl group of methamphetamine, and Adderall has multiple diamphetamine salts and amphetamine salts. But if you do a double blind with a few of those diamphetamine salts, they're somewhat close to a methamphetamine salt. So it's like, if I told you have a friend who's doing meth, you'd be concerned. If I told you had a friend who's doing Adderall, you're like, well, he must be in finance. You know, it's like, so it's like, if you kind of draw that out, that the chemistry route of like, hey, a lot of these things that you are talking about are just kind of a stigma, which if you still don't like, it's great, but just know you're coming from a point of historical storytelling, not from actual historical facts.
Yeah.
If you want to continue to be against it, great, but just know where you're coming from when you speak on that. And slowly, but sometimes surely, sometimes not surely, they'll come around. I mean, it's a game of life and not a game of like minutes, right? So it's like, if they come around in 5 years, that's still great.
Yeah.
Because it's, the war on drugs has been around for 50 plus years. And we hopefully live pretty long. So like 5 years from now, like if I can get people to kind of open up, I mean, it's 5 years too late, not too late, but it's 5 years long, but it's like, that can help the next generation. So yeah, just meet them where they're at.
Did I hear was some of the stuff I was reading about you? Were you microdosing to get off Adderall? Is that how that started? Because I just went back on Adderall, and I'm on 5 milligrams XR. So very little all day.
Yeah.
And it's helped like so much. Like I went off of it after college, but I would rather not be on it. It's the only thing like I'm on now, just to kind of like give me that kick in the ass.
Yeah.
Because like working for yourself, I feel like it's harder because you're not in a chair 9 to 5. But then when I heard that, I was like, ooh, I got to ask him about that just for like personal. Like I'm interested.
Yeah, I had so I'm a drug, I don't want to say proponent. I think every drug could be used in a very responsible, healthy way, with a relationship with it, just like how, a relationship to alcohol and friends and whatever. So I had a very unhealthy relationship with Adderall. When I was running my first company, I was taking like ungodly amounts. I don't want to say out loud. I was taking like 70 to 90 milligrams a day, probably.
I hear this from people, and I've never taken more than 20. And I'm not saying I didn't like abuse it in college, but I think my heart would explode when you like. And I know a lot of people who've taken that much. They're like, oh yeah, I know people whose doctors put them on 90 milligrams a day, and I'm like, bro, what?
Yeah. It's insane to me. Yeah. I could never.
I take 5 now. I'm like zooted. But, well, you build a tolerance like all substances. Mm-hmm. Right? So you build an exchange tolerance really fast. Your body's a magical miracle, and your body can compensate for a lot of things. So realize like, hey, we're producing this much dopamine now, this much serotonin now. Our body's doing X, Y, Z. We need to raise our benchmark of X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. So I was taking an insane amount of Adderall.
Maybe that's why the company did so well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. That's the thing. It's like, it's cracked out.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's 2 reasons. One, I was working like 17, 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
Can you believe they put the like it on children though? Like I told my parents I was going to go back on it, and they were like concerned, and I was like, you guys, you put me on 20 milligrams when I was like 5 years old. I was like, the fact that they put little. I don't know. It's wild.
It's hard for me to justify giving children any type of stimulant in general because brain chemistry and development. But I think I was on it for 2 reasons. One, I was working so much. Yeah. But 2, which is a larger reason, and again, it's a relationship with yourself, is because I was 21 years old. I had no idea what I was doing. Like I would literally, like when we were doing an acquisition, they would call me and the CEO of the parent company would say a word, and I'd be like, yeah, definitely. And then I would like Google like a legal website, like what does the word mean? I'm like, oh yeah, we get that done by tomorrow. Yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah, 1 second. And I like Google more stuff. Didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Wow. Because of that though, Adderall is very serotonergic or dopaminergic. So it's like it makes you feel confident in what you're doing. That's why when you first hour, you're like, let's go solve cancer real quick.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Literally.
So it gave me false confidence, which maybe made me delusional, which maybe helped, maybe not. That I knew I was doing because I had a team that I was leading. But again, it's a giver and it takes away because I was an emotional zombie. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't eating. I weigh like 180 now. I was weighing like 145 probably. I had a terrible relationship with my family and friends. I had a girlfriend at the time. That's how nuts I was. People, don't do this. I say this out loud now. I was like, how did I not get punched in the face more? I had a girlfriend at the time. And in my mind, we're amazing at justifying things as humans. We're brilliant at it. And I was like, hey, I'm doing this for us. Like, I want to make sure that we're set up. Like, I'm not seeing you because, like, we can be, I'm not seeing you now, but, like, we can be sipping mimosas later and, La Vida Loca. And so I wasn't seeing her. I was like, hey, well, I'll plan to see you twice a week, every, like, Tuesday and Thursday from, like, midnight to like 4 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, that should work, right? I'll go from the office, I go see you from midnight to 4, and then I'll go back to the office like at 8 a.m. And obviously she broke up with me. And I was like, why?
Pencil you in.
Why? Like you're on my schedule, look at my calendar, you're there. But yeah, because you're just emotionally, it takes a lot out of you. You're hyper, you're hyper active. And there's a difference between being hyperactive and hyper-focused. And sometimes we confuse the two. Totally. And when we're hyperactive, we feel like we're actually doing something great. But it's like, no, you're just hyperactive. Being focused is the main priority.
Like between busy and actually getting things done.
Exactly.
Like you can feel busy all day. That doesn't mean you're accomplishing anything.
I can pop an Adderall and clean my room twice. And if I'm not like drilled in what I need to do. Also, too, the whole loving yourself is an emotion. So if you're emotionally drained, not only you're not loving others, you're not sitting home and like contemplating how you feel about yourself, you're just drained. So I was just going through these motions, and on paper we were looking super successful and it was like really cool, but in my actual life I was this like black hole. And I had read of this neuroscience professor in Stanford, and that he had microdosed for like 70 plus years. So I was like, fuck it, I'll try LSD at first. But I still, again, so I'm not against. I think if drugs work for you and you get like if Adderall works for you and you sleep well and you like time it out well, go for it. I genuinely, and it might be how I might have an addictive personality, not really sure, but I genuinely love the high of amphetamines. Yeah. Right. So I was like, at first when I was trying to microdose, I was like trying to chase that high still. That's why I did LSD first in larger quantities, and it was helping. And this is all come back to like replacing Adderall, quote unquote. And it was helping, but I was still like, drinking a lot more coffee with it. And then it was like, I would take too much. So I'm like kind of tripping at work a little bit. And then I don't know what I was listening to, and it was like, you're trying to run a race where like the ending is productivity, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, what does that mean? Like, if I'm just chasing a high, I'm not really chasing productivity or even loving myself. I'm just chasing trying to feel good while I'm doing something. Well, why do I not feel good while I'm doing something? Oh, because I'm not loving me or what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm needing to like mask it with a substance. But it's like, if I change that fact that I actually love me, maybe I won't need a drug to make it feel like I love myself while I'm doing something. So the microdose concept came from like, okay, cool. We're going to microdose, and we're going to, not with the goal, quote unquote, to replace Adderall, but with the goal to be more mindful of my surroundings where I don't need Adderall to live in that setting. So then breath work, meditation, journaling, microdosing. It really helped me get to the point. I still take Adderall to this day every now and then. It helped me get to the point where it's like I was just more aware of like conversations I'm having with my friends, talking to my mom more, talking to like calling a friend every week. That is what allowed me to replace Adderall. But the microdosing was great because it made me more aware.
Yeah.
While I was doing these things, like it made, like I'd be walking outside, I was like, man, why is it the sun be sunning today?
Yeah.
I was like, oh wait, I microdosed. So I don't want to just act like it didn't help.
Yeah.
But I want to emphasize that like the combination of having the intentions of doing all those at once. Like if I was just microdosing by itself, and I'm really, I don't say this story a lot about microdosing because I'm actually don't like to talk about microdose without focusing on macrodosing because I'm afraid it creates this like exceptionalism of like, oh no, I don't do drugs, I only microdose. Like, oh, I don't drink, I only have a glass of wine at night.
Yeah.
Because if you solve the macrodose problem legally, you solve the microdose problem. You can microdose if you can macrodose. If you only push a microdose, policy can still not allow you to macrodose. So one solves the other one by just talking about one. One can still create an exceptionalism, whereas again, it's like, oh, I'm not a drug user, I just do a little bit of mushrooms, like 0.2, but like, no, I don't trip. Like that's for like druggies type situation. So I'm careful when I talk about microdosing, but it was benefiting or highly beneficial for me. But cool. I will say, if you do want to try that, you definitely need to have a vertical other health intentions in people around you in conversations for it to like really help you.
Yeah. Okay, that's so interesting. I'm like excited to do that. Although I know why you laughed when he said the sun be sunning.
Oh yeah.
Sorry. Sometimes we on the same wavelength. Did you laugh exactly because that day that we took a walk?
Yeah.
The other day, he and I, we needed to go get stuff done, and we were like, let's just take a walk first. And
I think we were hungover.
I might cut this out, but we were hungover.
Yeah.
And we decided we needed to we're like, let's just go get some sun and go on a walk. So we start going on, but we popped an Adderall. But we're on this walk and it's like 20 minutes. And like, I was like, man, like we just needed the sun and we just needed the air in our face and we're feeling so good. And let's go get this done. And I was like, man, like sometimes you just need a walk.
It's amazing what a little walk around the park can do, you know?
And we forgot that we took Adderall. We were like, I was like, Nick, that's why we feel so good.
Yeah. Oh shit. Like that's exactly what just happened. But
there's some sun and some amphetamines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, oh, that's why. But I guess I don't want to like, can you give us a little high level of like what MAPS is and why like everything that's gone on? I feel like the last year and then all the conversations and stuff that happened at the conference, like everyone is about to know what MAPS is in the next year, and they don't yet. So give us kind of like a...
Yeah, that's probably a good start, right? MAPS, we're a nonprofit that we're currently building medical, cultural, and legal context for the safe and beneficial use of psychedelics and cannabis. Again, we were founded in 1986 by Rick Rubin. We are currently, we are a nonprofit, but again, we have a for-profit pharmaceutical company called MAPS PBC who are doing the MDMA research. They're the ones who, hopefully in 2024, will be able to carry out the treatment of PTSD using MDMA therapy. So we want our research company. We research new possibilities of way to treat, whether it's PTSD or it's we use conjoint therapy or whatever. We research psychedelics. I would hope so. But we also help with policy. We have an incredible policy team led by Izzy. I guess the biggest thing I like to say we're a bridge between culture and science. Cool. We have an educational arm. We're building new online courses to learn about psychedelics, learn about the psychedelic history, the science of psychedelics, science of therapy using psychedelics. So we want to be like the intro. We want to be the research we have Google. We want to be essentially the Google for psychedelics. It's like if you have questions on it, we either have the answer or we have the platform ability to platform an organization or group who will have the answer to. We also know we don't know everything. We're not going to tell you if you have a question about Indigenous history. We're not like we know that, but we want to platform other nonprofits and communities and orgs who can have that answer. So yeah, we're just a people company who wants to. Our founder says net zero trauma. It's like our goal.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, again, MAPS like just a weird organization. Like it's like insanely smart, capable. Before I worked in the nonprofit space, I always thought you had to choose. Like either you're in a for-profit space and you can ball out and be really good at what you do, right? Be like the Michael Jordan what you do, but you had to lose some of like working for a larger goal, something bigger than you. He's like, yeah, I make $300,000 a year, but I work for like a online staple company. I don't know. Shout out to anyone who works out online staple. I'm not trying to like shit on you or anything. And then I thought nonprofit is like you can work for a really good goal, but you're gonna lose out on like the competitiveness and being able to work around like amazing individuals. And MAPS is like this weird, beautiful thing where it's like, I mean, my boss is a PhD. She worked at BCG, Boston Consulting Group, which is a Fortune 10 group. My boss's boss, our executive director, Chris, he sold I think like an 8-9 figure non-renewable clean energy company. Like they're not only brilliant, but they're like the most loving people I've ever met in my life. So like working here is like super weird because like every day you see these brilliant people who are like at the top in their field, being able to do amazing things, but also very servant mentality where they're not cocky. They don't feel like they don't know. They don't feel like they know everything. So like being able to see them being vulnerable too has been like this crazy, awesome experience. So yeah, we're really hoping that, and we're also kind of transforming who we are as an org because for so long we've been pushing this MDMA therapy. Now it's like finally coming to fruition. So it's like, cool. If that's not our only focus now, like what is MAPS? And yeah, it's really hoping to become like a storytelling educational machine that can both be in a room with the lead scientists on the neurochemistry of psychedelics, but also be in a room trying to bridge conversation between Indigenous leaders and the public, but also be in a room with Aaron Rodgers and some other athletes about how do you talk about this from an athletic standpoint, and then be in a room for the common Joe like me, and at a coffee shop and be that person. Every single one of those industries and communities have a educational leg through MAPS where they can learn at their own pace.
And we just didn't go to the conference.
I know. Nick's like, you want to talk about how stupid we are that it was in Denver and we just didn't go? Yeah, I'm just
that was a wonderful explanation, by the way.
I appreciate that.
Thank
well,
you.
You know, it's hard to describe because, like, again, like, what is a psychedelic company? It's so hard. Like, my grandma still doesn't know what I do. And it's like, my mom. So my mom came to this conference, which was like a really big thing to me.
Wow.
Because I am. Cornel West has this brilliant thing. He says, like, I am who I am because somebody loved me, right? And that is me to the T. I have a family. My mom raised me, but she's like the most open. Like wherever I've dropped out of school twice. I've dropped out of school one because I was just not doing right, and then I dropped out of school and I sold the company. And both times I would call her and she's like, "What do you need?" It was never like, you're gonna ruin your life, blah blah blah. I was like, "Hey, how can I support you?" Or when I was going to a drug industry, she's like, "Okay, I have no idea what that means, but like, what do you need?" So that's always been like very helpful for me because I've been able to. I talk at conferences about like legalizing heroin. Like I'm not tiptoeing around things. And I have friend groups who are just incredible, who are like very smart, very driven, doing things way bigger than I am that I can have open conversations with. So yeah, it's all helped me like become this. I mean, I'm not an individual, I'm compounding my relationships, but like this thing that I guess MAPS is hard to describe. I'm kind of hard to describe. So like coming together. So like I'm going back to like I've described it well, thank you. Because I have a hard time describing even like what I do and like what I am and with MAPS. So thank you for coming to my long, confusing TED Talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's kind of crazy. It's like where, when you have someone like you, like on a podcast, it's like, you can just like ask your background and like, how did you start that company and everything like this. But I think what we wanted to do is like, let's like introduce him. And then of course, like have you help tell the people like exactly what you do, but also kind of like ask you some other questions that now you know who he is. This is his take.
So we asked our friend Paul about you and we were like, okay, we're having Devon on. What do we talk to him about? And he, he's kind of like a cheeky, kind of mysterious little jester guy. And he, and he just goes, I don't know if he was alluding to something, but we had to ask because he said to, but he was like, you should ask him about any celebrity encounters that he's had involving psychedelics that are a really fascinating story.
I mean,
And not to like out anyone for that story, but like I was just like, that's a weird thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about MAPS. MAPS is like a super culture first company that just happened to be like in the sciences. So it's like, it's a Burning Man group, you know?
Yeah.
And so because they've been around for so long, like you get introduced to a lot of like pretty amazing, like high level people. I mean, I won't say any like individual stories, but like, it's got me. It's like the other day, and Paul knew Paul because Paul somehow has been involved in everything in his life.
Yeah.
We were in New York and we were at a psychedelic event, and then this guy comes behind me. He's like, go to this alleyway after this party. And I was like, all right. He's like, I'm gonna give you the password. You can only take a couple friends, but go to his party after, or go to his alleyway after this party. I'm like, one, who are you? One, two, okay, down.
Yeah.
I'm like, down.
I'm there.
And then I later found out it was like an SNL party, SNL after party. It's like, Meg Thee Stallion's gonna be hosting. And I'm like, I will go anywhere, Meg Thee Stallion.
Yeah.
So we're going, I'm like rolling right now. So I'm like, yes, okay, I'm down. We're in New York. I don't know the addresses, but I'm gonna find it. I was like, what's the secret word again? He tells me. I'm like, okay. So bring a couple friends along. We go find this like empty alley, which is one guy sitting outside the door. I'm like, okay, I still know words. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I got this. All right. Okay. I'm not gonna get jumped. This is gonna be a party. I didn't ask for the guy's name. Still don't know who he was, but we're gonna figure this out. So go over there. He's like, what's up? He's like, or he doesn't ask for the password. He kind of stands there. I'm like, crap, I kind of forgot the password. I was like, no, got it. Say the password. Walk in, which is his room, like 30 people. It's like his red lit room. And don't see Meg Thee Stallion. I'm like, damn, did this stranger lie to me? I'm like, I trusted him. But then I see someone on stage just kind of making fun of people. Like, it's like, giving the DJ a hard time and stuff. And I go and I'm like, is that Dave Chappelle? I'm like, that's Dave Chappelle. So we go and it's Dave Chappelle and it's like 30 of us. It's like 2 a.m. We essentially party. It's like 6 a.m. And then flash forward a couple of months, I'm with Rick in Austin. And Rick's is known by everybody. Again, he's like, this drug. He's like the drug Steve Jobs. Yeah. And I get a text like, hey, we're going to the opening of Joe Rogan's comedy house. I think like Joe's gonna be there and Dave Chappelle, some other cool people. You want to come? I'm like, do I want to come? Like, first of all, never ask that question again. Yes. Yeah. I'm gonna go over there. So we're over there and go in. We're sitting like at the private table over there. And Joe Rogan just comes by. I was like, hey, you are the psychedelic guy. So I'm like, yeah, I guess. And just start talking about, and Joe's like, and so is Dave. Like, they're both, I'm like, whatever. They're just people. Yeah. I know people have some feelings towards them. But yeah, like working at MAPS, like you just be at places and because everyone knows Rick. I'm not even that cool. It's not even me. That's what I'm trying to really say too. It's like, yes, I've had some cool experiences, but it's all because of the people that I'm with. Yeah. And then, I'm grateful now that part of my job is working with these, I hate using the word influence, but like people of influence to like bring these stories out and stuff. And it's cool. We got to hang out with a bunch of athletes now and like really get their stories. And what you learn is like everyone has like these very humanistic qualities and their sufferings. Like they go through some crazy stuff. And we start seeing entertainment and athletes as entertainment. So we forget like, oh, you have a sad life at times. Mm-hmm. And the more you meet them, the more they just seem just like kind of you. Sometimes even like more messed up. But it is fun. I mean, it's fun to like be in a room and you see like 12 people like tripping and you're like, wow, I seen you on everywhere. You do drugs. This is crazy. Like, I do drugs too. And it's just like, wow, am I in the inner circle now? Not really, but so I've had some very interesting experiences I probably won't be able to say
for sure.
I know. I was like, okay, Paul. I was like, we're gonna ask, but I was like, what's he gonna be able to say like publicly?
Yeah, but again, I'm really not that cool. There's some people I have within our staff. Like my coworker Natalie, she's in LA. She's like the star in the cultural world. So I'm sure she has everyone in between. She'll give me random texts of like, yeah, I'm at this party in LA, and it's at my friend's dad's party. And like, Diplo just showed up and performed real quick and just left. I'm like, hey, cool. I'm at a coffee shop in Denver right now. Yeah,
sweet.
Love this for both of us. Yeah, it's interesting.
That's sweet. It's interesting, like what I feel like with everything changing, like what you're kind of like allowed to say, like not you, but I'm saying just like anyone, let's say someone of influence who's a celebrity. I feel like now you're kind of like able to say like, oh, I microdose mushrooms.
Yeah.
Like I do that sometimes and then nobody says anything. But like if you're like, yeah, like I like to do Molly sometimes, like you can't publicly say that, like I feel like yet.
Yeah. Well, also what's crazy is like people are now understanding their influence, which is weird. And that's why education is so important. Take Mike Tyson. Hopefully, Mike, if you see this, you don't beat my ass. But I'm a fan of Mike Tyson, boxing for sure.
Yeah.
So usually if I like something, say I like a new pizza, I don't really have to know the cultural context of the pizza or like the ingredients ecosystem of it. I can just say, I love this pizza from XYZ, go to it, becomes highly popular. So Mike Tyson loves mushrooms. I don't know if you know that.
Oh,
I did not.
No. Oh, he loves mushrooms. I'm talking about like on podcasts, we'll grab a handful, like eat them on podcasts. But he also had a 5-MeO DMT experience.
Wow, I know about it.
That he loves. And 5-MeO comes from a certain toad that its ecosystem is decently fragile right now. So Mike Tyson, not trying to cause any harm, goes on his podcast multiple times. Like, this is the greatest thing I've ever done. I did 3 more times immediately because it helped me so much. So people see like, oh, someone as hardcore as Mike Tyson gets all this healing from 5-MeO. Well, then what happens? Well, people started scavenging these areas for these toads, and they were dying because they act like deer in headlights. So a lot of times, one, you have to milk them. But 2, when you drive in actual land, they see headlights, they freeze, and all of them get ran over. So that had a huge negative impact on the population of these toads. But like Mike Tyson didn't know that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, so like what we do with these celebrities and people who have a higher influence is like, look, we're not trying to tell you, like, one, Mike, it might be cool to like not take a handful of mushrooms on a podcast.
Yeah.
Like maybe you can handle it, but like people might see that and be like, I'm gonna do that too. But it's like, how do we give these people influence the information and tool to responsibly influence?
Yeah.
So it's like, cool, I know Mike Tyson, I know you like to tow. I'm not gonna tell you stop. And I'm not gonna tell you say your truth either. I'm not gonna say to not talk about it. But maybe be like, hey, by the way, before I tell you this is a fragile population. It can also be synthetically made, so you don't have to go from the toad. But I had this experience and I wouldn't recommend it doing this way, but this is my truth. So it's like, how can we give them the complete picture to tell? Because we don't want to tell you the story to say, but we want to give you the complete idea of it. So when people look at you, when I'm an 18-year-old kid looking at Mike Tyson, I'm not going to be like, I'm going to get my Jeep right now and go to Texas or Mexico and find these toads because Mike Tyson, my hero, said he's going to do it, right? It's like, so that's Mike Tyson was the best one because it's like everyone knows Mike Tyson, but also you saw the actual harm that was caused by not knowing the full story of it.
Sorry, go on.
No.
And I know like peyote is like a lot of times like where people harvest it is like on native land, and it's like you're not allowed to be on that land, and like I'm talking like deep reservation stuff, or like sacred mountaintops, and so like going to those areas and like harvesting something which is their sacred medicine to those specific groups. It's like, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, and it's so hard to. I mean, peyote takes a long time to cultivate. So, and there's some cultures that won't do synthetic because it's a spiritual thing, which is very, obviously. So so like don't go on land that's not yours and take things that are not yours.
Yeah.
And I get, there's some organizations, I think all nature should be available for everybody. And in a sense, like objectively, I guess that kind of makes sense to us. Like it's in nature, we all deserve it. But like there is no such thing as like free and open ways of living without societal understandings, right? Like as a society, if I want to live in a society that best benefits us both, there are actual rules and standards that we have to create for each other to best move forward, right? Like a river without walls is a lake. There's no movement, right? So it's like, yes, it's all nature, yes, but are there rules that can actually help benefit us as a society to live together better? Yes. If you want to go off and live in your own society and by yourself, and that's a societal standard or societal movement, go on by all means. But if you want to live in a society that actually is productive towards each other, there are rules I think that we should follow and listen to each other. And maybe just don't do peyote unless you're invited to a genuine like indigenous practice of it. And there's other ways to do mescaline. Mescaline's a key. I mean, it does take longer and it's harder, but I think it's worth it for like us to respect the whole culture that's been around longer than our idea what psychedelics even are.
I completely agree with that. So generally when I hear groups like that say things, I'm kind of like, respect. Yeah. I've done like San Pedro, but I've never done peyote, but it's the same chemical. But where San Pedro just grows, like you can buy it at like the coffee shop.
You can buy like at Home Depot sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's a dope thing about like I genuinely love the idea of science is from the understanding of like, you can get these chemical things. Once you start talking about the spirituality, that's when it changes. Like going back to the toad, some people won't do synthetic because they believe that there is the spirit of the toad, which could be or can't be. Like I'm not arguing that, but it's like a lot of things that we can do that you want to have these experiences you can do from synthetic way. You can also do outside drugs, breath work, or whatever. And I think the more that we can educate both sides, the better we can live together because we can have our cake and eat it too. We can have those who want to do the spiritual side, but we can have those who just need. I've had some of my most spiritual things were off an acid that's completely synthetic for the most part.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we have a better knowledge of learning what the science is, but also learning about each other and culture.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's one big thing that I think, I don't know if MAPS or like Zendo, but a lot of like education for as these things become legal or decriminalized, letting people know, because if you just all of a sudden, like even like mushrooms, like people think like, oh, I hear people microdosing mushrooms all the time. But like if you take a handful of mushrooms, like you're gonna like see God. You can't just like do that.
Yeah.
like
that is
like in the middle of the day, you're at a like I think sometimes they don't, if you haven't been taught and don't know like the safe way to do these things.
Yeah.
Can.
You're exactly right. Seeing God too is one of the ways I found this. I'll tell that story here in a second. So we need to get a full understanding of what the word harm is. And we're used to the word drugs and harm being together as a physical harm. We think of like heroin harm, whether you inject or whatever, doing harm to yourself, domestic violence. But psychological harm can be just as bad, if not worse, than physical harm.
For sure.
And psychological harm, we also compare it to is like, oh, well, you lose yourself and you become like mad or whatever. Not even that. We live constantly trying to tell ourselves a story of who we are, to like just hold ourselves together daily.
Yeah.
And we know it's a story, but daily we try to do that. So if there's a substance that takes it away, even if it's not like you don't go mad, like right, even if it's not something where like you're in fear and you're like whatever, that can still be hard if you don't know how to integrate it. Losing the story yourself and then going back to your life where that story was the main thing that kept you going. Yeah. And if itself is a hard thing, when you don't have these barriers and these guardrails to help you integrate. So that's why Zendo is also a nonprofit. They're amazing at training people to how to hold space for people who are having a difficult situation. They're not trained therapists, but they're there to facilitate a room where you can help hold space for someone who might be having a tough time. They're at Burning Man. They're going to be at other locations. I would highly suggest looking them up. They have online training too. But yeah, you need to be able to not harm others or yourself. Do as little harm as possible. Because you can do things like see God, which is a crazy thing to say. It's like I come from Texas. Like, it's a very conservative Christian place, and I used to do acid, just like go to music festivals and have fun. I wasn't trying to like do anything spiritual because I didn't even know that existed. One day when I was 20, I literally was at a music festival and saw God. I was like, okay, this is like interesting, and I was like, okay, well, who do I go to? Because I'm not gonna go tell my pastor. I didn't really go to church then, but like still, like I'm not gonna go. Who am I gonna tell my huge Christian grandma? Like, yeah, because it's like, all right, well, so I didn't get to integrate that. So I was like, you walk around this earth like kind of just feeling missing, and that can be psychological harm. You don't fully know what to think or what you believe about like, your existence. So yeah, you should be very careful of these things. I'm not gonna tell you how to take them, but be for spiritual or fun. I do it for both. Sometimes I just take acid because like it's a Saturday. Yeah. But my intentions are that. My intentions are like, hey, I'm gonna take it for pleasure, and I want to just like be with myself and explore and set that intention. But I tell people, like, hey, I'm doing this. Yeah. Can you check up on me in 6 hours or whatever? Like set those containers and treat it like it's a psychological phenomenon. It's like nothing we've ever experienced before. So you wear a seatbelt when you go driving, like build you like a psychedelic seatbelt essentially. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Because I had heard on another podcast, you had said you were like kind of like a staunch like atheist.
I wouldn't say atheist per se. Like I'm a nerd. I think I said that. So I grew up in a very Christian home, but my mom's an amazing Christian. She's the type of Christian that like, she loves all people. And she always told me that like faith is finding something. Faith's not comfort. So like if you just grew up a Christian and the reason you're a Christian is because your parents are and your grandparents are, that's not really faith. Yeah. That's comfortability and that's being involved in something. So she's always been, go find it. I believe this, but go find it. So getting older, I started getting into like nihilism, Nietzsche, and I was always trying to explain things. So I wasn't trying to disprove it, but I was also not trying, but I didn't believe there was something. So it's like, I wouldn't try to disprove it unless you were like in my face trying to prove something, right? Yeah, so I wasn't trying to prove something, but I wasn't trying to I would disprove it if you were like in my face saying, well, the Bible said this. So I was like, well, scientifically or whatever, historical context or whatever. And then I saw God. And then I was like, oh, shit, this is crazy. What is that? So it goes back to like psychological harm, right? Because it's like, okay, cool. I had this container where I was not really believing, but then I saw something, but now I have nowhere to integrate it. So now I'm torn spiritually, I'm torn psychologically, but I got to go on and living in this container I've been always living because I have no other way to, what does it mean to integrate? Like, who do I talk to about this? No one I know around me has done this. So you're just like kind of like this lost thing. And, I read Ram Dass's Be Here Now. And as I was reading it, it talked about how like you must die, like an ego death essentially. And everything it was saying was like exactly how I was feeling. I was like, oh my God, like people have felt the way I felt. And that kind of like introduced me to this world, and I got more involved in the psychedelic space, quote unquote. But yeah, so like now, like my belief is, Ram Dass also says, I'm like a huge Ram Dass follower too. I'm like quoting him a lot, and I think he's amazing. But one thing that really helped me is his famous quote that we're all just walking each other home. And like once you treat religion as a language and not as a barrier, it just all becomes beautiful. So now I read the Quran again, I read the Bible again, and once I read it as like a beautiful language for people to learn how to love themselves and love others, or at least attempt to, it totally changed the way I looked at religion and how I follow these teachings. And instead of proving that Jonah got eaten by a whale, just loving the storyline of like faith of like what does it mean when you're swallowed by something you feel like you can't get out. You don't have to believe that Jonah was actually swallowed by a whale, but the storyline, just like any book, right? It's like faith of being in the darkness, being where you feel like you can't get out, and having that beam of light, whatever that is, to help you get out, knowing that there's going to be a light. So it was hard because Texas is still Texas. And it's hard for me to say, like, when people ask me, do I believe in God? It's like, I do, but it's like, whose God are you asking me if I believe in? Like your Christian God, or because even me, when I would ask as a Christian if you believe in God, I'm asking you if you believe in the God that I believe in, which it might be different than the Christian God that my neighbor believes in, because it's like, I'm not sinning. Am I the Christian God that's believed mostly in the New Testament and thinks that the Old Testament is kind of there, or am I fundamental, am I like an old school Christian where I think both books have a considerate weight? So yeah, so it really just like, it really opened up things of like, I feel like we're gods, we're in the imprint of God, like we're creation. I'm not gonna try to get too meta, but like try telling the pastor you think you're God. You're like, okay, you're going to hell for sure.
Or like consciousness experience in itself, but we're all the same consciousness. You go there and it's like
it's like, okay, that makes zero sense. It's like I try to explain it one way. Is this Ram Dass again? I might just be quoting Ram Dass like or it might have been Terrence McKenna when he says like we look at it as, we're an island and our island's a whole world and the water around us is just the ocean, when really we're the ocean. We're all together, we're all the same ocean, and we have islands, which is the experience of consciousness. But really the reality is that we're the ocean. That's like what's going on. It's just we focus on an island when the actual experience itself is all connected through this ocean. And it makes it hard to be a dick to people. Like, oh, I'm kind of just talking shit about myself right now. So I wouldn't say hardcore atheist, because I never like wanted to disprove. Atheism to me is a religion. It's you are trying to disprove. I was more agnostic, I guess, where it was like, could be, can't be. If it is, it is. If not, it's not. But now I'm more like, I think there is a binding figure. If we want to call it God, that's great. But I think there is a binding force of, love, obviously. That's the most psychedelic thing we always say. That, I think love creates. And our duties as individuals is to create, because with creation becomes a outlet for those who take their sorrow and find solutions in their own way through the inspiration that you were able to put out, be it create in your job place or art or music or like whatever, like build furniture. We express our love by creativity because we are creation. And I think it's the only way that we can, as a group, transcend an individual and motivate others and help others get past what their current situations are.
Damn.
That's really well said. I'm reading Rick Rubin's book right now.
Oh my God.
Have you read it?
Yes.
Okay.
No, that book is so dope. Yes, let's talk about it, please.
Wait, constantly now, Nick's putting on stuff. People ask me what music I listen to, and we're always together, and I'm like, Nick is such a good DJ and into so much stuff. So I just listen to like, Nick's just my own personal DJ. But he'll put on like 99 Problems, and he's like, yo, did you know it was Rick Rubin's idea to do this a cappella at the beginning? It's been like everything. And I'm like, what has he not had his hand in? So I haven't read it, but I feel like you've been giving me the cliff notes.
I said the most pretentious thing the other day. And like, I don't really know a lot about hip hop. I really don't. I like the big names, but that's really it. I said to someone who was super into hip hop, I was like, a Beastie Boys song came off. I was like, I love the Beastie Boys. He goes, dude, the Beastie Boys suck. And I'm like, oh, so Rick Rubin, who produced it, it sucks? Really? And then he was just like, Rick Rubin produced the Beastie Boys? I'm like, yes, dude. I'm like, okay, I don't. Now I sound like one of those like fucking hipster dude. I have a man bun, and I'm like, oh, really? You're just going to disagree with Rick Rubin? But, anyway, for those of you who don't know, I know like probably everyone's heard of Rick Rubin, but like he is a guru at a certain point where he's just like a master of the psychology and embodiment of creativity, and he helps other people bring it out. And I didn't know that until recently. I just thought he was kind of like a hippie dude that was like really into producing. And he just released a book right now, and it's literally, I mean, it reads like the Tao Te Ching, you know, or it reads like a religious text, or philosophical text. And I'm just like, I can't even get through. I started about like, I don't know, like a month ago, and I like can't even finish it because I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to set that down and let that marinate over the night, you know? And I just feel like he's really inspired me to just kind of like sit with myself and be like, what is creativity? Like even like with this podcast, like what are we doing, you know?
Yeah, that book is dope. And so in an interview, he said he actually wants people to read it that way. He doesn't want people to read it through, and he on purpose wrote it like almost a religious text. Rick Rubin has had such an impact on me. Him and like Virgil Abloh, I have Virgil's stuff tatted on my hand because what is creativity? I felt like an imposter saying that like I creative design and I do all these campaigns and stuff because like I didn't go to like school for creativity. I didn't like my background's not, I didn't draw or paint. I do now, but like not well. And it was like Rick Rubin really put it. It's like it's like asking questions. It's if you know what you're doing, you're a craftsman. That's not an artist, right? Artist is you don't start with the answer. Like you ask questions, and whatever feels right, that's creativity. And that feeling expressed is what creative is. Not knowing I want to paint the Mona Lisa. Paint the Mona Lisa, that's the craftsman, which is needed. But that's totally different than being an artist. But yeah, he is so dope. Like him, and then like Cornel West also is this brilliant individual who's both from a philosophy standpoint, but also made an album with Prince. And so you see all these like amazing people who have so much wisdom. And that wisdom is like just a byproduct of how they learn about the creative process. And it's like kind of backwards. You think you have to learn books-wise to find a creative process, and the wisdom then transfers to your creative process. Like, no, actually, when you find a way that you best express the way to love yourself, that wisdom then comes.
Yeah.
So it's like try a bunch of things, be bad at it. And it's like, great, dope shit. I suck at fucking paint. I still paint. You know, like I do what I think feels right. And some people like it and some people don't. But it has helped me, and I think music and creativity is the only way. I always say information is dope and research is amazing information, but true transformation or true education is a transformation, and those are brought to you by cultural vehicles: the comedy, the arts, the dance, the music, and those pair with information to then reach the barbershops, basketball courts, lawns. But you need that cultural vehicle that lives creativity, or you will always lose the information at the lab. The information will stop at the lab. And I won't be there. I work with people in New York, and like their first introduction to LSD is A$AP Rocky's song LSD. Right?
Yeah.
But they're not going to listen to that song and be like, okay, dope. Now I'm going to go read a 2A activation peer-reviewed paper from Johns Hopkins. Like that's not how they're going to learn about LSD. They're going to learn from their friends and go back to the skate parks and be like, yo, this is dope. So if you don't get information in those areas through creative means, you're not going to be able to actually raise the community in a way that's healthy and that's safe, and that's moving forward to allow them to explore their creative self and their own self and their consciousness and their love for others. So yes, Rick Rubin, dope. Read that book. I've read it twice already.
What's it called? I forget.
The creative way or creative act?
The creative way of being, or I forget the name. Honestly, it doesn't even say on the cover of the book. It's just a circle.
You know what I love about just what you've told me about Rick Rubin is that he found I think everyone has a superpower, multiple superpowers, but I think that there's something that is their superpower. They do so much better than other people. But there's a book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. Do you know it? It's all about like your upper limit theory. Or he came up with the upper limit theory. And it's that we as humans like haven't learned how to feel good yet. So we'll always do something psychologically to like to ruin it for ourselves because we just aren't used to feeling that good. But a lot of the book is talking about like you have your zone of competence. So it's like what you do well. And you can get paid doing that and you know how to do it. Then you have your zone of excellence. It's like you're so good at this. But then your zone of genius is just where you should be. And it's where you lose time. Like you don't even realize you're sitting there doing it. And Rick Rubin's zone of genius is like being able to pull the creativity out of other people. And he's made a career on that and done it. And is clearly that like, not psychedelic magic, but like just that real magic. It's like, it's transcendent because he's pulling that out. But if he was to tell you 20, 30, 40 years ago, you know, that's my genius is I can pull the genius out of others. And I love that because that's what Gay Hendricks talks about is even if it doesn't make sense what your zone of genius is, like your zone of genius might just be sitting there like free journaling and you come up with these business ideas. You don't know how to execute the business, but maybe you're just so good at that. And so that it can be these really intangible things that are your zone of genius. And it sounds like Rick Rubin found his. And I don't know, it's just really interesting.
Yeah, they're dope. I mean, I think amazing people like that are just like when Virgil died, I think it was Tyler, the creator, said at his funeral, it was like, when Tyler, or the dope thing about Virgil is he put the dopest people in a room together. And that was his skill. The dopest. And to do that, you have to have a level of understanding what brilliant people, and we're all brilliant, what motivates them. So just like you said, you got to pull that out of them and then facilitate those connections and just be able to ask the questions because most people can't ask the questions. And again, it goes back to what he says an artist is. And I think that is so brilliant to be able to like, go back and explore yourself, lose the ego. A lot of times the ego makes it like, oh, I can't ask the questions. I got to be the creative director here. You know, I got to be the one that, it's so, it was either Rick Rubin or I forgot who else. I was watching their master class and he said so much about trusting your gut and trusting others' intuition. And he was like, even as a leader, you can tell someone you don't like something, but like still in a way that serves as a servant and be like, so he's like, so for example, you give me a design I don't like. If I intrinsically don't like it, most times as leaders we say, I don't like it, I don't have to give you a reason because I'm the boss. So but that kills the creativity and the exploration and the curiosity of someone else. So what he would say is like, hey, my gut's telling me I don't really want this right now. Let me go home. I'm gonna sleep on it. I'm gonna ask 3 questions. I'm gonna make up 3 questions of why I don't like it. Bring it back to you and let's explore this. So it still it's still an exploratory period. It's still a period of questioning. There's no like shut down. So again, that's bringing the genius out of other people because now you're asking 3 more questions. They're now answering these 3 questions of why they like it, and you might turn out with something better, whatever. But yeah, it's just being able to put people in a room and get that creativity out of others is like one of the most ultimate ways to love others. And that Rick Rubin's just fucking genius at that. So was Virgil. So was like Pharrell. You know, like they're all like brilliant stylists. You know, Pharrell brought like Bape to, you know, the US. You know, Virgil is an architect and he had Off-White and creative director Louis Vuitton. And they just, you know, all skated. And like, it's just like a crazy thing when you understand the vertical of like culture and stuff and being able to get that out of people. It's just so fucking dope. Sorry, I could ramble on this. I love those guys. I love those guys so much. Like they're just such an epitome of what culture is because like we in the West are so concerned about the plant or the leaf instead of the soil and the whole community that makes something. And it's like, if you can just focus on what you love and what others love and like share those things with them, like you can build so much more. Like the greatest individual will always just be the greatest individual in that one aspect. And it's like what true influence is like being interested and being invested in multiple things because people are not one single subject.
Absolutely.
And that's like one of the reasons why the type of guests that we have on, there's really no theme. It's really just people who we think have like what we call the sauce, people that are so fascinating, so successful, and have so much fun doing it. And I I just like want to learn from the people that we have on too. Cause as we're slowly trying to figure out like exactly like what we're doing and how we're going about it and like having more people, like when we started this podcast, we had really no idea what we were doing, but it's just like, all right, let's keep doing it. And as we keep doing it, we're slowly kind of figuring out more and more and, you know, trying to be like, you know, getting our genius zone about it.
I think you're doing a great job. I still have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So,
which is crazy.
I think it's just a constant like trial and error. And I love these podcasts that are not directly concerned about one individual subject.
Yeah.
You know, we've done a lot of psychedelic podcasts. And I love talking about psychedelics, don't get me wrong. But it's like, you know, my thing's community, my things are people.
Yeah.
And I think that psychedelics are just an avenue or just an aspect of, you know, consciousness. But it's like, we are so much more, and there's so much more that makes us. So it's like, I'll talk about skating or rap or anything any day of the week and get deep in that, and music and comedy and and all that. So I think y'all are doing dope stuff.
Thank you.
Trying to get there. Okay, we want to play a little game, and then I'm just going to ask you like what you're most excited about right now, like coming up with you. So we didn't even write down. We sort of planned this, but we didn't. We've been starting to play with our guests a game of Fuck, Marry, Kill. But we're gonna ask you Fuck, Marry, Kill, LSD, psilocybin, or MDMA.
This is the most ridiculous question.
You know, I've never thought I would ever be asked this question. Fuck, Marry, Kill. I mean. You know, they say marriage is hard. So I think MDMA would probably be the best to marry because it's a loving, very loving substance. Man. LSD got me in this world. Yeah. But mushrooms are just a brilliant creation. It'd be tough to kill it off. You know what? I'll say I had to kill acid just because. Kill acid, okay. Yeah, because I love it and it's my baby. It's actually my favorite. Yeah. But I don't always have 12 hours in a day to trip. You know? And mushrooms are a lot easier to come by. There's also health benefits outside of the psychedelic aspect of it. Man. Yeah. Okay. I'll do that. MDMA, I'll marry. We'll have a happy marriage.
Mm-hmm. All right.
That's a great question. I've never worked out that thought most in my mind.
Yeah. No, it gets really interesting answers. It's like a funny kind of like crass game, but then we did it on our last podcast with Sean Kenyon, and we made him do like tequila, whiskey, or vodka.
Because he's a famous bartender, and it was just like...
That one's easy for me. I'd kill the fuck out of vodka.
Don't even need to think about it.
I'd marry both, either one, tequila and whiskey. Fuck vodka. Fuck vodka. Fuck vodka.
Mm-hmm. And then we had talked about another Fuck, Marry, Kill, but I'll just let you riff it right now. What you want to ask him?
We were thinking a lot about like just like psychedelics and journeys and people going to find themselves. Okay. And so we thought like, okay, Fuck, Marry, Kill of cities, but like Bali. Have you been to Bali? Yeah. Or kind of like
Black Rock City.
Black Rock City, which is where Burning Man is. And then like New York City, where it's like, you know, you move to New York and you...
Well, you're moving back to New York.
Yeah.
Coming up.
I would... So I would sound so weird. I would fuck Black Rock City. Just because it's one of those things. It's amazing. Yeah. And in a short period of time. Okay. And I would love to come back to it, but you can't be there for a long time. This is impossible. And it takes so much out of you. So fuck it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would kill Bali just because like I can get the experience at Bali in other places. Man, but marrying New York sounds so much. Yeah. You
could never relax like you could in Bali.
Like so much. True. I'd marry New York though.
Marry New York.
It'd be one of those relationships where it's like
you got to work at it.
We would use a lot of MDMA. We'd be like a prime MDMA therapy candidate, but I'd marry New York. It sounds so funny. I'd fuck Bernie Man. Yeah. I'd fuck your shit out of Bernie Man.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a good
one. Hopefully we'll see you there this year.
Yeah.
No, we're working on it, guys.
Yeah.
If we have any followers, have some connects.
Oh my God. Get us to Burning Man.
No, we think it'll happen. We do everything like almost too much by our gut. which is why we didn't end up at the psychedelic conference. We were like, God's telling us like we don't need to go this year. We were like, if it needs to happen, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this year we were both kind of like, it's the year for Burning Man.
It's the year for Burning Man.
Yeah.
It's been a long time coming.
They say the Plato provides, and the Plato has always provided for me once I put it out in the world. In the craziest ways. Like, when you first hear that from people going Burning Man, you're like, okay, that sounds like the most Burning Man thing
I know.
I've heard in my life. And then it happens the first time, you're like, okay, fuck, whatever. And like the second and third and fourth time, like you're like, okay, this is crazy. And then you're like, okay, I'm a full believer.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Plato provides. If you want to go, it'll happen.
It's kind of similar to what they say about ayahuasca.
Oh,
like Mother Io tell you when you're gonna do it.
It's one of those things. I mean, we talk about the universe, but like, if you really do think we're all connected, and you put something out there, the connection happens.
I have a story for you. Okay, so I can't believe I didn't even think about this to tell you about this. Okay, so you'll know what I'm talking about, but I've tried to bring this up with people, and not a lot of people know what I'm talking about. So I was at Gem and Jam in 2017. I just graduated college, which is a music festival, and a pretty heady music festival.
Is it the sober one?
No, that's in Santa Fe, because that one was, I guess that one was even more heady. I was like, wait, you people
That's
aren't
what
on
he
drugs?
said. He was like, wait, like it's all sober people, but just trying to like reach it another way.
Yeah.
He was like, it was worse. Yeah.
They were like, that was wild. But I was hanging out with some people that I like randomly knew from Albuquerque, and then he was like, oh, like come meet up with me. And he was friends with a lot of like psychedelic artists, and there's just like a lot of psychedelic art at Gem and Jam. That's kind of its thing. Also, it was like crystals, because it's like literally a gem show. And so I was hanging out with them, and they were all passing this gummy bear around, and he was like, oh shit, someone offered it to me. And he was like, and I'm like, what? He's like, no, he was like, do you know who Bear Osley is? And I was like, no, I don't know who that is. And he was like, man, okay, but hey, it's not up to me who gets to use it. And I was like, I have no idea what's happening. So I guess he handed me a gummy bear with a tab of acid in it, but it was apparently Bear Osley's reserve. And Bear Osley was one of the managers of the Grateful Dead. And they say, I don't know if this is true, it sounds like a heady urban legend to me, that there is only a limited amount left of the original acid, and Bear Osley's reserve is it. And I tried it, and it didn't feel like acid. I honestly couldn't even tell I was on anything, because it was doing things to like my brain. Honestly, I just felt like very loving. But it was the weirdest experience. I honestly didn't even, I thought I was sober for most of the time until I was like sitting there thinking like, okay, it's very hard to explain.
So that story, quote unquote, true. Don't know if that's true as far as like it being. Yeah, everyone has a part of the reserves now. I've heard a story like 5 different times where people were like, yeah, I have limited. My friend was his friend, and they used to like date one time, and so like I have access to blah blah blah, or like we have access like the last tub of it. I've heard that story a few times, especially at festivals, and especially at people who are like trying to impress like new people in the space.
Yeah.
And drugs have always been that way. Drugs have always been like, oh, I got the purple MDMA. I got the pink MDMA. When it's usually either like food coloring, or it's like, oh, I got the Tesla press ecstasy pills. Yeah. It's like, you can make that with any tea press.
Yeah.
But you've always done that. You've always like, because the set and setting is so important when it comes to taking drugs. If I told you like, hey, I got this LSD that makes you feel insanely loving, with that prep, you're probably gonna feel like insanely loving. Yeah. It's like, oh, I got this LSD, it's super heady. It makes you really think about music differently. You will think about music differently. Or like the whole gnomes, the DMT gnomes. Like everyone sees like DMT gnomes now. Is that a real thing? Maybe, but also Terrence McKinnon brought up, and people have talked about so much. Yeah. That it kind of like sets you to do that. But I hear that story quite a bit.
Yeah. I just thought it was funny. But like, so there are like reserves, do you think?
I think because there's a large amount of LSD made by a few people, and I have no idea though if they're still out there. If it's like, because they made tubs and tubs and like large quantities of it back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So does someone probably have it? Probably. Yeah. Does someone like have it? It's not like inventory, right? You don't have like probably an iPad and like checking off like how many tabs they have, or maybe fuck it, I don't know, maybe
That's just always fascinated me. I was like, didn't even mean to go down that route, but
Well, I guess to close, like, what are you most excited for, like, coming up for yourself, for MAPS?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, I'm moving to New York in
Yeah.
a couple weeks, which is fun. A couple of things. I mean, I have the harm reduction company, More Life, which I don't know if I've talked about that. We say we're turning fashion to action. It's actually one of my hats right now. Yeah.
Pretty girls test their drugs.
Pretty girls test their drugs.
Yeah.
So what we do is we include harm reduction tools for our fashion. So you get fentanyl testing strips for every purchase. You sometimes get Narcan based off our supply. And we're looking forward to doing some like larger artist partnerships in the future to where we do merchandise collabs, but our harm reduction tools come with their clothing also.
Cool.
So that's super fun. That's more like a passion project. I love fashion. I love it being an expressive billboard. Like fashion's always been great at being a cultural billboard, but it's been hard to translate into action.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're hoping like with this, you always had like the tax the rich or like the whatever, people making like broad statements, which are great too. Still, like getting that awareness is still great. It's like, cool, how can we take what fashion is, which is a cultural expression, and now push it action towards that way? And that's where More Life came from. And it's all upcycle clothing. They're all vintage military jackets because fuck fast fashion.
Agreed.
And
Hell yeah.
yeah. So that's one avenue. MAPS, I'm super excited about possible partnerships that we're doing here soon. I'm really making a push for like the larger music and brands that are aligned with our community first aspect of it to like really get the space open to others. I mean, we're known if you know us in a niche, but like that's only 1% of like the world. Like, so I'm really excited about not having to think about a conference every single day. So like that's awesome. And where we're going, again, our MDMA treatment is going to be most likely, hopefully, FDA approves next year, going to be available to people with PTSD. So that's super exciting.
Yeah.
And really being able to see like what's next in this community. I mean, it's been like big for the last 5 years as far as like new build or organizations and businesses, and people are really starting to like ramp some really cool things up. I'm just excited to be a part of it. I mean, if I can do anything, I kind of end a lot of podcasts like giving not a shout out, but like if you're an athlete or a musician or an artist who's like looking for a way to tell a story but want to be mindful about it, come to us. That's our job. We have, be it me or my amazing coworkers who do this as far as like working with you to be educated. We send people who have a following our intro to the psychedelic fundamentals course for free, so they can take this course, like learn more about fundamentals. They can talk about it. So if there's anyone out there, even if you're not an athlete or famous too, 100%, like anyone can get this. But if you're someone with an influence and a following, you really want to tell your story, and you don't know how, 100%, please give me a call, give MAPS a call. We would love to work with y'all. I think that's the next front. I think the surface level influencer world is, I think, dying. And people are realizing how big of a mental health crisis we're in and how much social media has pushed that. So the new people that they follow no longer can just put an ad about Coca-Cola. They have to say substance. And the people who want to influence, they're starting to actually want to have a depth. They're realizing that the last 10 years of content creation has really taken a toll on them. And they want to be able to both know what they're talking about and also help their audience. So it's like this weird world now in a good way where these influencers are like, well, I actually want to talk about something deeper because I have been affected. And then the audience is like, actually, I've been affected too, and I want to hear stuff that is a little more deeper. So I'm really excited that I hope MAPS can be that, either be the bridge between the two, or we can help platform organizations and nonprofits who would be a better bridge to help with that leadership and that spiritual and mental growth.
Awesome.
Hell yeah. All of that. So exciting. Well, thank you again for coming on here. I mean,
we really appreciate it.
I feel like we're learning so much. And shout out Devon. I was like, hey, do you want to like be on our podcast? Is this like forward? And he's like, oh, I did a podcast last week. It was like on Tim Ferriss's. And I was like, all right, I know we're like friends with the same people, but I was like, you can say no to me, Devon. I was like, I didn't know how cool you were.
Okay, I wasn't flexing like that.
No, he was. You were doing the opposite of flexing.
Yeah.
You were really just kind of like, oh yeah, I just did, and I was like, all right, well, like, you're way cooler than I even knew. I was like, you can totally say no to me. I was like, I'll walk away right now.
No. No, this has been awesome. Also, this is a Gucci wallpaper. I just want to
how did you know?
I was like, one, this is amazing wallpaper. Well, it's funny because we were just at the Gucci store in where was I? Or in Aspen. I wasn't buying anything.
Yeah.
Do they have this up at the Gucci store in Aspen?
Well, no, but they had their wallpaper, and we were talking about how awesome Gucci wallpaper is.
Yeah.
So when I came in here, I was like, yeah, it's Gucci. I was like, well, we literally was just speaking about how I love Gucci wallpaper. So this whole setup is dope.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So yeah, but yeah, super happy to be on here. I'll be on anytime. And look up maps.org. We are a nonprofit. We're always looking for donations. We're trying to push this to the finish line, and really trying to help people. So if you have some cash laying around, feel free to go maps.org. And yeah, maybe in the future we can do another one. And
absolutely.
Hell yeah. We'll come to New York. I have just like deep down, again, going with the gut, been called to go back. But it's like, man, I've moved to New York a few times and then left. And every time I leave, I'm like, I'm never going back, and I need a break, and I need nature. And then I start to miss it. It's like my ex-boyfriend. And I'm like, this is the only place I've ever felt like at home and like loved. But not like a bad ex-boyfriend. So I don't know. I'd love to have a studio up there and us to be halftime there. That'd be the complete goal.
Yeah, come on by. I mean, I'll be in Dumbo at first, and then probably in Williamsburg. But yeah, you're always welcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get my Gucci wallpaper up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be nice, but perfect for Brooklyn. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Right.
Thanks
Bye,
so
guys.
much.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
See you later.